Well, our guy that's in DC is supposed to come home tomorrow,
Oh, nice.
but I'm not sure when or how. We've heard train, we've heard bus. Last night it was a bus. Sue was picking him up, and then I was picking him up, so I'll learn that tonight when I get home.
Have
Great.
fun.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Having reached the hour of 7 o'clock, I'd like to call to order this meeting, the Education Committee, October 27th. If we could begin with introductions to my left, please.
Ed Tate, School Board.
Bob Hickey, School Board.
Mike Thorburn, School Board.
Ed Salomon, School Board.
Matt Ferguson, IT Board.
Joe Hidalgo, School Board.
Michael Roosevelt, School Board.
Andy Sanko, Superintendent.
Al Funk, Director of Secondary Education.
Nicole Crawford, Director of Elementary Education. Julie Eastburn, District Coordinator for Math.
Yvette Pyle, School Board. And Mary Ann McKee, School Board. And I understand Mrs. Marcel will be joining us in progress. We'll be sure to acknowledge her when she arrives. We have just 3 items on our agenda tonight, but I expect they will be filled with lots of important data and information for us, and I expect good questions and discussion. We'll pause after each of those items for questions and discussion. So beginning with program planning, am I looking over to you, Mr. Funk? Thank you. Take it away.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So every year, as we prepare to publish our program planning booklets, our course catalogs, if you will, for the following academic year, so this would be for 2023, 2024, we take some time to update the Education Committee on proposed course changes. These changes are most often, and this is certainly the case this year, name changes that either better reflect course content or are easier for students and parents to understand as they make critical class choices for the following year. So if I may, I'm just going to give you a sense or two rationale for each of the changes. So business management would be renamed Introduction to Business. And the course has evolved over time to focus on the larger aspects of business, such as the role of business, ethics, marketing, and operations, rather than just a focus on management. The new name is a more accurate description of the course content, and there are no cost implications or staff implications. Entrepreneurship would move to accelerated entrepreneurship. The current entrepreneurship course is a general elective. High school business teachers have partnered with the University of Iowa to offer college credit in a dual enrollment course. The course name change will reflect the advanced goals and priority standards of a course associated with college credit. Again, there would be no staffing or cost implications. Honors Accounting full-year course would move to an Honors Accounting semester course. This change is in response to the student-reported difficulty of scheduling a full-year elective. The course content will be adjusted to meet the objectives of the course with considerably less instructional time. No cost, no staffing, because the course will be offered in both the fall and the spring semesters. Honors Business Management would move to Honors Management and Leadership. And the change in course name more accurately reflects the inclusion of organizational leadership as part of the curriculum. Again, no cost, no staffing. Music Technology would be renamed Music Technology and Studio Production. And during the pandemic, both professional and amateur musicians moved performance venues from the stage to their home studios. Although music technology can broadly encompass everything from a headphone jack to computer-based software, music technology and studio production better reflects the verbiage which is recognizable and familiar to high school students. So again, no cost or staffing for that course. Using and Understanding Technology would be renamed Introduction to Technology and Engineering. The previous name was actually very confusing for students. The new course name more aptly describes the course. No cost, no staffing. Technology Education Department, this is an interesting one. This would be a name change for an entire department. And the Technology Education Department has had many names over the last several decades. You've had Industrial Arts, Tech Ed, and now we'd be moving to Technology and Engineering Education Department. That's a mouthful, sorry. And the new department name reflects current college certification programs for teachers in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania for this particular credentialed area. It also more closely aligns with the next generation of science standards. And English, finally, for language development. I know we spent a lot of time speaking, I think it was at the Finance Committee meeting on October 13th, about the need, and it was kind of an emergency need that we had due to the heavy increase in the number of the students enrolling in Council Rock School District during the summer and the fall, especially from Eastern Europe. So these two courses, one at the middle level and one at the high school level, would target the needs of these new immigrant students. And when I use the word immigrant, remember that's the Pennsylvania Department of Education definition, any student that has been in the country for 3 years or less. So a heavy need for English learning in this area. Heretofore, those students that have entered our strategies for improving the reading course or a reading and writing workshop. And we've done well, but the ELT specialists really see a need for more targeted instruction for the emerging learners in this particular population. So the board was gracious enough to kind of meet our emergency needs for staffing. So now we hope to kind of target specific courses for this particular population in 2023 and 2024. And next up, these couple slides should be familiar with that. Actually, I'll start with this one first. So this was last year, the board approved our expansion of our gifted program and our offerings. So again, heretofore, we had offered gifted kind of through the social studies, humanities, one curricular area. It didn't seem intuitive. You could be gifted in multiple areas. So we offered an expansion of our course offerings at the elementary, middle, and high school, give students an opportunity to be with like peers, ability-wise. God bless you.
Thank you.
I think that was a very wise move. This is just a reminder that those courses, and here are the high school courses, will now come online in 2023, 2024. So we thought it wise, while giving you an update on what's going to be included in the program planning book, to remind you that the gifted courses will also come online. Now, I know I was saying no cost and no staffing implications a lot with the other courses. I will say that we have to wait and see a little bit with the gifted programming. Obviously, it's an expansion of courses. So, by name, by virtue of the name, you think, okay, there's potentially some cost implications. We don't see that happening at the elementary level. However, at the middle and high school level, there could be some staffing implications. Again, the Pennsylvania Department of Education puts a ratio on the gifted classes, so you have 20 to 1, 20 students to 1 teacher. So, for example, if a traditional English class had 28 or 30 students and now it's 20, and it's not as easy as to say, okay, where's that 8 or 10 students? They can be absorbed, and many times they are absorbed through enrollment, through elective courses students may select. So that's why we don't have a firm knowledge of how this will shake out until students actually participate in program planning and make their course selections. You may have, and this has been the trend, you may have a large graduating senior class and a smaller incoming freshman class. So again, the numbers can fluctuate. But I just wanted to put that out there with transparency that there could be some staffing implications with the expansion of that gifted program at the middle and high school level.
Great. Do we have any questions or comments? Yes, Dr. Grillworth.
Well, that's great. I mean, but how will that work? Freshmen coming in, there'll be an honors English / gifted, so there'll be one off. You'll work the schedules for these kids because they pretty much all take the same classes. Mm-hmm. So they'll only be gifted students in those 2 classes.
Correct. Okay. Correct. So this year, and it's the work of Casey Black, David Heiser, Althea Thompson, and the curricular department heads are making sure that they establish gifted courses that meet the rigor that we would expect of a course. So you have to distinguish between, an honors offering, an accelerated offering, and a gifted offering. So you're talking about higher level thinking, more, critical analytical type of thinking. So this year, they are making sure that that curriculum is in place for next year.
And then the other two follow-ons are, I don't think we need to be certified, there doesn't need to be certification for this gifted and
Yeah.
And are we going to do anything GPA-wise? Is this a hyper-accelerated or, I don't know, and I'm not asking.
That's a good question. So when the question is about GPA and weights, and we certainly do that with our academic accelerated honors, we have a highly stratified curriculum.
You already do, so
Yes, advanced placement. I believe this would be honors level weight, but I think that is part of the discussion that is ongoing as they
I
fully develop these courses.
don't have a strong opinion, but someone's going to ask, so I.
It's a legitimate question. Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes.
Sure. Mr. Funk, back on the last page, it said it was that one FTE in the middle school split between the two schools as what you could say possibly.
Possible.
And at the high school, it doesn't quite give it. It could be more, I would say, since there's more subject area. And 4 grades, of course.
It's 4 grades, but there's 2 offerings per grade level. And again, I think it actually may be a little bit, I anticipate it would be less at the high school, just because the students have more choice at the high school level for other curricular programming, where at the middle school, your gifted choices, you're taking the science or the social studies, where at the high school, you may be taking other courses. And I think it's easier because the schools are larger to absorb those, maybe the fact that you have some classes that are 20-to-1 teacher ratio. So I don't know, but I suspect it wouldn't be more than that.
So one other question is, I really thought that the students were kind of not all the same track. They all didn't take the same classes that were in the honors. They had that one social studies class together. Are they required to take all 4 subjects? Now this is just giving them options.
Choice.
Okay.
Just an expansion of the program.
And I'm guessing it would be honors level. That just sounds normal.
That seems intuitive that would be the weight.
All right, that's it for me. Thank
Many
you.
gifted students drop out of high school because of the number of choices.
Correct.
And we kind of pigeonhole them into social studies. Right. I think we'll maybe keep some more kids in the gifted program longer.
Excellent. Sounds good. Thank you.
I have a comment and a question about the accelerated entrepreneurship course. First of all, I'm really pleased to see us partnering with higher ed and offering our kids the opportunity to receive college credit for their courses. Should a student in that course wish to receive credit, I assume there would be some additional cost to that student.
Thank you. So I did mention no cost for that. However, if it follows the model of our Gwinnett Mercy dual enrollment program, there is a nominal course, a charge, I believe it was $150 to $300 for receiving the 3 college credits. Yeah.
It's great value for our students, and again, I really applaud.
Not a bad deal.
Not a bad deal, and I really applaud that we're exploring those partnerships. Thank you. Anything else on our?
That is University of Iowa. We currently have an agreement with Gwinnett Mercy. This is for the 23-24. They're looking at
How do we land on that?
I guess that's a specialty area, entrepreneurship and business, I'm assuming.
No, I agree. I've said this for several years now. This is a great opportunity for the parents.
Absolutely.
Not just the kids, for the parents. This is great. Good stuff.
And Mrs. Palladino.
So you mentioned college credit for just the top 2, introduction to business and the entrepreneurship. So that's the only option for credit, for college credit?
Just for these new courses, yeah.
And now, someone has to do introduction to business first before they do the entrepreneurship, right?
Yes, prerequisite course, yeah. But we are looking to expand our partnerships, because we do see the value of the dual enrollment, and certainly financially for the parents. We've been in conversation with Bucks County Community College about some of their offerings. What ends up happening is the college and university kind of has to certify the high school teachers, if you will, to make sure that they are properly trained to deliver the college curriculum. They go through that process, and then it's not a bad deal. You get the high school credit, you get the college credit,
No,
and
no,
it seems like a win-win.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
And now for the gifting program in high school, it sounds like if they have so many different options, do you anticipate that not a lot of students will choose to take these new classes?
It's hard to say. I think, like Dr. Thor mentioned heretofore, just having social studies was very limiting, so we saw students that opted not to even take the humanities course. I think broadening the curriculum to all 4 core areas certainly is more appealing for students, so we may see an increase on the number of students that elect to take these gifted offerings. I hope so. I think it's going to be a solid program.
So what would be the advantage of taking this class, say in math, versus one of the other options that they have?
So the class specifically will be geared for gifted education, again, whether that's the rigor, the higher order of thinking, the analytics, the critical thinking that's involved. So, and that's what folks are working on this year to make sure that we have in place, so there's more substance. Not to be mistaken with more work, labor, if you will. Sometimes when we talk about academic rigor, and again, the stratification of our curriculum, as you kind of look at academic accelerated honors, I used to talk to my teachers all the time about this. It's not simply, oh, we need to give them more homework. So, that's not the differential between the levels. It's more substantial than that. It's more about the rigor. It's more about the critical thinking and the refinement of certain skills that are involved. So that's what I hope that the gifted offers.
Is it possible to develop them in a way that they can get credit for college?
We could certainly look at different dual enrollment opportunities.
Because that would make someone to really want to take the class if they get credit.
Sure.
But remember, this is only for kids that were identified when they were in 1st or 2nd grade, so
I understand
it's
that.
not that anybody can come in because it's.
I know what the gift program is, yeah. My son was in that. Thank you.
And I just want to note, Mrs. Marcellus joined us, welcome. Any other final questions, comments on this topic? And hearing none, we're ready to move on.
Okay, I'm Julie Eastburn. For those of you that don't know me, I'm going to give a little bit of a math update for you. The first thing that I wanted to talk to you about was a couple times I've had one-on-one conversations with a couple of you about math scores and why they are so different. So the first thing I wanted to point out was these are the percent of students that are proficient or advanced in English language arts, math, and science throughout the state of Pennsylvania. So you can see that in the state of Pennsylvania, as is a national trend, math scores are typically usually lower when you're looking for proficient and advanced than ELA and science. So that's also reflected at the district level. So you'll notice that when you look at some of the math scores and you say, oh my gosh, they're so much lower than ELA, they are. The important thing that you want to look at is how far off is our average number of students who are proficient and advanced from the state average, because then that's giving you a similar comparison between subject areas. So the first thing I wanted to point out was some of our PSSA data starting in 2017, which was pre-pandemic, life going on normally. These are our PSSA scores broken out by grade level. And you'll notice that we definitely took a hit in 2021 as we were trying to make up for the learning that was lost with students. But the very exciting thing for me to note on this was in grades 3 and 4 this year, you'll notice that we are outperforming pre-pandemic, how we did pre-pandemic. When just this week, or maybe it was the end of last week, the NAEP scores were released across the country, and across the country, our ELA and math scores overall were down statistically significant, yet we are, at this point, performing better than we did pre-pandemic in grades 3 and 4. Certainly you notice that there are still some gaps going on in 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and those are certainly areas that we're working on. But we've made large gains, and we certainly are in those grades starting to close some of the learning loss that students experienced at that level. There was also a request for this data, which shows the cohorts of the students who started in 3rd, 4th, or 5th grade in 2017, and how those PSSA scores had progressed. And the interesting thing about this, as we look at it, is 87% of the data up there was pre-Bridges implementation. So the parts that were post-Bridges implementation were the students that were in grade 3 in 17-18 that are currently in grade 8 was, I'm losing my train of thought. So they were in 5th grade when we implemented Bridges, which then unfortunately coincided with the start of the shutdown where schools were closed. So those students only had basically 3 marking periods worth of education in Bridges, and then were shut down. So I just kind of included that slide to show you the trends. You'll notice that our trends kind of follow the percent provision goes down in each grade level as it does across the state, ending in 8th grade where there's a low percentage of students across the state that are proficient in math, and then you roll over, as Alan and Nicole will talk about next, into our Keystone, which many of our students take the Keystone and the 8th grade PSSA at the same time, and their scores are much higher. So. So I also wanted to give you a little update on illustrative math. This is as we talked about before, it is a standards-aligned curriculum. It better aligns to the PA core standards that we teach. But I want to point out that although there's been some comments that I've heard from parents over the years of, students not having to master facts, and are we getting away from mastering basic facts? And I want to assure you that that is not the case. I can tell you in kindergarten, students have to master the basic facts 0 to 5, addition and subtraction. Second or 1st grade, it's addition and subtraction through 20. 3rd grade is addition and subtraction through 100, and then multiplication and division through 100. 4th grade, I mean, I could go on, and you don't want to. It's not probably important to you, but I just want to point out to you, as we look at these standards-based curriculums that are aligning to the PA4, that we are not losing basic facts along the way. It is vitally important that students be able to perform whole number computation, fractions, and area, perimeter, and volume. Those 3 areas are actually the biggest predictor of success in Algebra 1. So that's definitely something that we are working on with our students. This curriculum, the illustrative math, is carefully sequenced. It has, it really is getting students to learn to think and talk about mathematics. It's getting them to actually see real-life examples of mathematics. I was just in a classroom teaching a lesson, and we were talking about ratios, and there was actually a visual of, you could add. It's a good thing Beth Lynch isn't here, but you can add colors in, and it changes to green, and if you have more, if you don't have the right proportion, then your 2 colors are off, so it shows them how a ratio table could work. So it's really giving them real-life examples of how, if your ratio is off, your paint color is not going to be correct. If your ratio is off, your recipe isn't going to be correct. So it's really giving those real-world examples. And that's one of the benefits of the program, is it's really trying to show students this is why we're learning ratios. This is why we're learning scale. We're not just, setting two ratios up, setting them equal and figuring out what X is, because that really, in real life, doesn't really help us that much. And research actually says that it is the standards in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade that are probably the most important standards that we teach students, because they are the skills that students are going to need in real life math, or in real life, the math they're going to use. So, that's what we're continuing to work on. In illustrative, so far the feedback from most teachers has been positive. There definitely is a learning curve because we're asking them to teach in a different way, but over 90% of the teachers, I would say, are very satisfied with the program. They're working through the kinks and figuring out which parts of the program works best in their classroom for students. But it seems to be getting, as the weeks go on and I'm in more and more classrooms and I come back to the same classrooms, I can just see the comfort level of students and teachers rising, which is nice. Going all right. Questions or comments?
Great, thank you. Questions, comments? Who'd like to go first?
I'll go first. Real quick, you just mentioned that area, perimeter, volume, and ratio taught 6th, 7th, and 8th grade were some of the most valuable skills for a student to learn. What happens if that student ended up being in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade during the pandemic and lost that? How do we make sure that they didn't miss out on that instruction?
That's a great question. And the interesting thing is, and I can speak specifically, I can start with area and perimeter. We start teaching students area in 2nd grade. When they start doing their arrays of multiplication, a 2x4 array, they're really finding area, they don't know that yet. So we really had started teaching those skills early on, but yes, you're right, if they were in the pandemic, they missed that. But knowing that those were vital skills for students, as we were having to make curricular decisions on what we could cover and what we couldn't cover through that time period, we looked at the priorities and we focused on those, so we were sure that students were getting those necessary skills.
But how did you do that? Did you do that after the pandemic? I mean, have you gone back to that? I mean, the question was, if the student was in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade during the pandemic, what have we done to make sure that they understand those concepts that are so important? What have we done since the pandemic now?
Since the pandemic, teachers are continually going back and looking for gaps in student learning, because we know that there's certain skills that if kids can't work with fractions, they can't do algebra, because algebra is so overwhelming. When you change numbers to letters, it blows kids' minds at first. So we know that, so teachers have been designing their instruction to meet those needs, because they have to have those basic skills to be able to be successful.
I know, I'm asking, what have we done? I understand that they are important.
So teachers have actually had to go back and reteach some things that students didn't know. We're still working on that. We have, through 8th grade, we have pre-tests that we give students, so that we can see, if a child doesn't have these specific skills, they're going to struggle in this unit, so then we have to find a way to remediate them. It could be at win time, it could be at recess time, it could be at RA time, it could be that most kids sitting in the class need it, so I'm going to have to take a day and teach that skill before I can move on. And I've had teachers email me and say, I took a day to, reteach this skill because students didn't have that background knowledge. Is that okay? And I'm like, of course it is, because you can't move on if they don't have it.
Right. I mean, because I think that's fundamentally where my sort of questioning begins, is the idea of what we lost, what the learning loss that have been lost, especially in math. If you don't understand some of these foundational
Correct.
Elements, it's difficult to build.
100%.
If and higher level is harder to achieve, and you can get a lot of kids that are sort of out of it. And that's a rolling shift.
Correct.
And if it happened in middle school, I think those areas, as you've demonstrated what we're doing, can recoup it. But do we take PSSA Keystone data and use that also to understand what areas we need to go back on
Absolutely.
to get our kids?
We absolutely
Better on.
do. We look at that data, we look at the strands that we see as a district we're struggling with, and we make curricular adjustments from that.
Those details is what I would have liked to have seen. What have we done specifically in specific areas based upon this data? That's what I would have liked to have seen in this presentation, but thanks for so far.
Mr. Hidalgo, did you have something?
Oh, sure. Thank you so much. Could we go back to the scores on the map? Or whoever can go back to, thank you, ma'am.
Which one,
All
this
right.
one or that one?
Well, I have a question about both, but to me, it seems like fifth grade, well, overall, and it's another slide, but math is by far where people struggle the most in standardized versus science, you didn't see much, and English or whatever language.
100%.
So math is so critical, and it's hard for people to grasp. It's amazing because it's all repetition, right? That's usually how you learn math, is by repeating it. But from my experience and what I'm seeing in the data, if you can move to the next slide, please, where it seems fifth grade always seems to be a tough spot. So if I look at the fifth grade and it says from 2020 to 21, it says eighth grade next to that. So I'm just trying to, first I want to figure that, how does the eighth grade relate to?
Those were the fifth graders that were in, they were in fifth grade in 2017, 2018. So that was their percent of students that were proficient or advanced
Okay.
when they were in fifth grade. And then in sixth grade, it was 68.1% for that cohort of students. Those students weren't tested in seventh grade, and then in eighth grade, it was 34.4%.
Okay, because it's fifth grade cohort, it's hard to really, I'm trying to understand that. But my point is this, I know, and if it says NA for 2021-22, is that because?
That's because those students took the Keystone exam.
Okay, so I guess my question is, first of all, because I'm glad you're in the room, because what level or what grade do you teach children to divide fractions or multiply decimals?
Dividing of fractions is a sixth grade standard. Multiplying decimals, I'm going to say fifth or sixth off the top of my head. I can't pull that one out, but it's fifth or sixth grade.
Are you sure that that's being taught to the kids in sixth grade? Because they're starting, and I'm seeing my sixth grade student is it's just basically in the work that he knows how to do it, but we haven't done it, and maybe that's
Well, in sixth grade, if your child's in sixth grade right now, it's still the beginning of the year, so they haven't gotten to the fractions unit yet, most likely.
Yeah, it's in the units with geometry and stuff like that, so it's already in there, so maybe they're skipping around, I don't know. But, and multiplying fractions is required of the homework, but, I'm sorry, and also multiplying decimals, so it's kind of like we have to teach them because, from my experience, the illustrative math is a little difficult to work at home. It has the instruction, and then it has the homework, but the instruction almost looks like practice exams itself. It's very hard for parents to navigate it. I'm just used to going to the back of the book and seeing an odd or even question answered, explained.
Typically, the elementary programs don't have the answers in the back. That's
Right.
just not something that usually starts in an Algebra 1 textbook.
Right, and some of the language can be interpreted like, if it's like different ways. So I'm not really, I have to learn the program, but I don't find it user-friendly that we're piloting at sixth grade level.
Okay.
And the other thing is I feel a lot of kids are scoring terrible on the exam last year, for math in particular, and where is the, because if the parents don't raise the red flag and I think it's impossible for a teacher to do it on their own. So we have to get more resources. Maybe that's where the summer academy comes into it. But I don't think every kid that struggled in the PSSAs last year was participated or invited to the summer academy, even though I think it was open to everybody. But we have to figure out how to identify the learning loss and do it, because we're going to be halfway through the year before we figure out, that it's already, 6th grade is so important because we start the 7th, 8th,
Correct.
back to high school.
Our middle school standards.
So, they lost the last 2 years, so.
I don't think they
still-
lost last year. I think,
Well, you have to look at the academics. I mean, you have to look at the test scores. Some schools are better than others, so there's
They are.
definitely,
They
why is a good question, but that, if you can find out why, then maybe you can prevent it from happening more, and then also address the kids are behind. It's just the way it is, and we have to do something about it.
and I think illustrative is set up to do that. There are pre-tests in illustrative that is meant, teachers are supposed to be giving them. It's meant to say, these are the skills the students haven't mastered yet. So Julie can't be successful in Unit 2 if she hasn't mastered these skills. So teachers need to use win time, or perhaps if there's a large group of kids that need a remediation, then they have to use that. They have to take instructional time to remediate those skills. That's just.
Are there assessments done for the children to know which ones are struggling in particular? Because just from the
They are, yes.
pre-test, right, so I know we're doing it, and we're just going to keep at it. And I just hope I see it, because I'm not seeing it in my particular struggling student. I didn't
Can
hear
I
about
ask
it.
something to clarify what he's saying? So are you saying, because you have experience from your son, I think your son in 6th grade, right, that the illustrative math is not good enough? Because one is the learning loss from the pandemic, and the other issue is we change the way we're teaching, and maybe that was not good enough, or, so I'm just not sure
No.
exactly what you're saying.
When we did Envisions, I wasn't happy with Envisions either, so it's not really to do with my particular situation, but as a parent trying to help my child, it's hard to find a good program that's going to be parent-friendly. Even if you go online and look at the resources, and I like doing this kind of stuff, and I find it very hard to navigate as a parent. It has nothing to do with my son, that part.
Before we come to others, and I most certainly will, I just wanted to jump in, if I may, and perhaps address a little bit more what Mr. Roosevelt and I think Mr. Hidalgo were referencing. In addition to what Dr. Eastburn said, if you don't mind my 2 cents in personal experience, Mrs. Crawford was my building principal. I taught 6th grade math, pretty much exclusively. And what would happen in our schools, and I'll generalize and say our schools, when those scores come in, we would have a faculty meeting. All of us would go through the data together, and we would look at 3rd grade scores, 6th grade scores, the years before us. Where do we see the needs? Where do we see a potential for accelerating kids? And then collaboration would happen among colleagues within the school. So in addition to the things that you're pointing out about how do we target, how do we remediate, or how do we fill gaps, that to me was always a really good practice. And I know it happens in all the buildings. This data is not just sent to you in an email. You really sit down, you sift through it, and you use it, I think, very effectively toward instruction. So if you don't mind.
Can I piggyback on that real quick, because I have to call out and give a shout out to Mr. Hinchy, who basically, as soon as those scores came out, the next day we were offered Wednesday math tutoring for 6th grade, and everybody's been using it. So I do know that people are on top of it, and it's literally test scores come out, and now one of the teachers is offering after school remediating tutoring, which is great.
And I want to hear from Mrs. Crawford, and I know you have some comments.
I just wanted to reinforce the similar point when you were talking about that beginning of the year data. We're looking at multiple data points, not just PSSA, but there is certainly, as you shared, a process that we're looking at across grade levels. What are we looking at in terms of students that are coming to us, and our students, how they performed last year, grade level meetings. I'm going to give one example just to paint a bit of a picture. A few years ago, our PSSA data at Goodnow was consistently showing that our higher achievers were not showing growth, and that there were some issues there. And through looking at the data, through some consulting, through collaboration across the grade levels, we realized that there were some things that we needed to do to bolster and extend and offer some really in-depth, higher order thinking activities for those students. And I know Dr. Eastburn came in, and this is not just GoodNotes, just one example, came in, worked directly with the teachers, and gave some really substantial resources and tools, and they also worked together, and that became a goal. We used the data to inform that instruction. Then we saw, again, pre-pandemic, but some great growth with those higher order achievers. So that there is a system in place for looking at that, as well as all beginning of the year data to show who is not, using some of those foundational skills. And we'd be remiss if we did not acknowledge the impact that the pandemic did play. So some of those data meetings right now that in that cross-grade level articulation that's happening is sounding different than years past. There are students that are not having certain skill sets that we need to, and I love the example, we need to back up and see what we need to do to be able to address it. And sometimes, and I think teachers have really done a nice job with this in the last year, they have to slow down the pace if it means going back and teaching those basic foundational skills. And whether it's individual students, whole group, or to the whole class. So I just wanted to reinforce that point that that's happening in buildings right now. And these are good questions. And the feedback that you're giving, Mr. Hidalgo, about parents, it's really good for us to hear because we're so often addressing students, teachers, what support do they need to have to meet the needs of students, but there's that parent perspective. I'm a parent of 2 elementary age students. There are times things come home and I think to myself, oh, I'm going to have to find out a little bit more about this, reach out to the teacher, and then that helps the teacher realize we may need more going home to explain certain lessons and concepts and how it's being taught. So that is good for us to hear tonight, and we'll make a note of that. But I just wanted to punctuate some of those pieces about analyzing the data, not just PSSA, but what we're doing formatively and otherwise in schools.
Thank you.
I just wanted to quickly, since you jumped in and provided that information, which I think is really helpful, and since Mrs. Crawford did also, as a parent of students in this district, as a board member on this board, that's the information that I'm looking to see on a board here at this point. Identifying a problem, articulating the process, and finding data to support the solution. That's kind of what I want to hear, that sort of level, instead of just throwing up really high-level, commingled data that just scratch the surface. I want to understand, what is the process of our identifying this and what have we done to come up with solutions? That's kind of, I wanted to see more specifics. I wanted to see specifics of schools, the difference between Newtown Middle and Holland Middle. I wanted to hear that process exactly that you said. What's the result of all these groups in the staffing meetings, of everybody looking at all this data? What's the result of that? What is our result? That's what you did when you were in 6th grade. I appreciate it. What was our result? That's what I wanted to hear tonight. That's what I was expecting to see on the board.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Hickey.
Thanks for the presentation. I do have a couple questions, though. If you could go back to slide 8, it's the one previous to this. Up. The other way. Now, I guess my question is there an explanation for the 7th and 8th grade scores? Like you said, you and very well, like grades 3 and 4, those scores look very good. Now, there seems to be a slight aberration in grade 5, but if you look at 17, 18, 18, and 19, they seem to be pretty good. But then in grade 6, everything jumps back up to somewhat normal levels, but then our 7th and 8th grade levels are just, in my opinion, abysmal. I mean, much like Mike was saying, like, what is the plan? Like, what is the the goal here, like, how do we get those numbers up? Like, what happens? These are the same kids, basically from the same groups, the same neighborhoods, and our scores are cut in half on their levels. Like, I don't know, is there, I guess I'm just looking for, what goes on in the 7th and 8th grade that maybe I'm just not aware of?
Can I jump in and give
Sure,
one?
please.
So I'll give one example. As we were compiling this data, and then we have the 3 to 6, we have the 7 to 8, and then you're going to see the high school Keystone scores in a moment. So obviously, we saw the repression in the math scores, and whether that's, you're seeing that in the report with the National Accreditation of Educational Progress reports that come out, math scores across the board being depressed, 4th grade and 8th grade. But 8th grade in particular, so when I spoke to our middle school principals and they talked to me about these scores, which we do, a couple of interesting things they did point out. So at Newtown Middle School, there were 26 students, and I'm just talking about 8th grade now. And when you're in 8th grade and you take Algebra 1, you take both the PSSA 8th grade and you take the Algebra 1 assessment. So 26 students were proficient or above in the Algebra 1, yet they failed to make proficiency in the PSSA 8th grade. Right? You had 38 students in a similar category at Holland Middle School that met proficiency in the Algebra 1, but did not meet proficiency in the PSSA 8th grade. So I'm only raising that to say they're different assessments. They're different assessments. So, you know, you can read into that in terms of how robust certain barometers are. That's just an example from the middle level that I received from a couple of the principals.
You'll also see the numbers in parentheses are the state averages. We don't have the state averages yet for last year. They just haven't released them yet. So I'm not disagreeing with you. That's part of why we are putting into place illustrative math that has instructional strategies that have research shown, teachers are using those instructional strategies in their classroom. Research shows that students achieve better. So part of how we're addressing this is implementing a new program that better aligns to the PA core standards, which is what students are being tested on.
Yeah, I mean, because I don't believe this is the first time this issue has been raised in reference to scores. One of the other things I'd be interested to see, Mike might have referenced it as well, is what are the scores across, like, well, in the 7th and 8th grade, it's a simple comparison. Scores in Newtown, scores in Holland. Whereas in the other grades, I mean, you're dealing with 10 elementary schools. But I would be curious to see, to pinpoint if there's a specific that we're missing, or
That's
is it?
As a curriculum coordinator, that's not.
I think we spoke at the last education committee meeting, and we said we bring you the data. This is definitely a 30,000-foot view, and as you mentioned, there may be some mumbling, jumbling of data, and it's hard
Sure.
looking at data at this level.
Yeah, and if there are mitigating circumstances,
Yeah.
I mean, like you said, when you mention these kids that do well in.
But I will tell you, this is a preliminary look for us. When we look at this data and we see some scores that we kind of raise an eyebrow with and say, I just need to understand that better, we are going to dive into the data. We do look at it longitudinally, because you can't just do it at a snapshot in time. It has to be, there's so many variables that contribute to why we are where we are. So we are going to look at it. We break it down by school.
Break it down by, actually, if I could jump in,
Yeah.
student,
Sure.
grade level, school, all of that is yet to come. I think as we shared in the last education committee meeting, it was really important for us to be able to at least express what we were doing the last meeting to address learning loss. The goal of the meeting was to share this preliminary data, but certainly we're going to drill down further as the weeks go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's good. I mean, the only thing I would conclude with is, you know, PVOS is that value added. So that's the system in Pennsylvania when you really start to look student by student, okay, did you make 1 year's worth of progress? And then there are projections that go with that. And obviously, it's a little bit better for the older students because you have more data to make more accurate projections. So these are what your scores have been, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade. You can start to make fairly accurate projections about where they're going to be. And then you can start to target certain student groups. So if you see that there's a clear deficiency in whatever the particular subgroup area is, boom, that becomes our target area. That's the work that will ensue. This is just, yeah, I don't know if that's a good idea, but we're throwing it up there. These are the scores. These are the scores.
And the PBOS with the, real quick, just to add to functioning, the PBOS that's related to growth and projection, we're looking to re-engage with some consultants we did work with years ago. They were very, very helpful to both principals and teachers, where we took our data, we looked at the growth, and they were able to help, especially teachers, better understand it, pull it apart, then have an action plan. We worked directly together. Just again, one example, we met with the consultant. I worked with Dr. Eastburn and said, okay, let's figure out the action steps for teachers. And we have data to support, again, that made an impact on scores. So I just wanted to add that piece too, that there are resources out there to help schools that we haven't had these last couple of years because of everything that happened.
And I also want to say to Dr. Sanko's credit, when we had the training for illustrative math over the summer, he made sure that administrators attended the training so that they knew what to look for in the classroom, because ultimately I work with curriculum, make sure we have a vertically aligned curriculum. It's the building administrators that are the supervisors that make sure teachers are implementing it. So it was a really important point that Dr. Sanko had administrators attend so that they know what they should be looking for in the classroom with teachers.
Thanks.
Dr. Tolman?
Yeah, sorry, I had a chart. I was going to stand up for that.
Oh, no, I was
I have some comments and then some questions. The state numbers mean very little to me, frankly. That bar so low, you'll trip on the way out the door. So comparing us to the state's going to guarantee that some lead will get over the bar, so that doesn't say much. This chart, I mean, I know we picked apart and we want some more granular data. This chart does say one thing, closing schools was really bad for education. I can't stress that enough. Closing schools was really bad for education. The other part about this is, Dr. Eastburn, you said 6th, 7th, and 8th grades were the most important for mathematics moving forward. We're failing miserably there. Those numbers, we fall off the cliff in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And I have asked Dr. Sanko and his team to aggregate those numbers for the last decade or so. I'm pretty sure the pandemic didn't cause this. This has been ongoing for more than a decade. And I'm asking, when is it going to be fixed? From an education standpoint, we seem to change math programs like you and I would change socks. They change all the time. We can't blame it on that if we're going to change math programs every couple of years. We can't. So something has to give so the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders actually come up. And it's not a new problem. It's not. This is an old problem. And it's been lingering and lingering and lingering. And to Mr. Roosevelt's point, I would like to see the plan. What are you going to do about it? I mean, you got a decade or more of data. What are you going to do about it? That's what needs to happen. It's great that you're tracking PBOS. I always like to track the lowest kids. You look at those, but also the highest kids, because it's real easy to ignore the high performers because, as you said, Nicole, they don't perform. If you don't look at them, you can ignore them, and your scores will be fine because they're performing. They're not getting a year of growth. They're just kind of flat.
And what was interesting, and I shared this example earlier today, with that PBOS piece, we needed to also help inform the teachers, because it was easy to look at them saying, oh, this student has consistently performed in the highest, the advanced range. They can't grow more. It was something that we needed to educate ourselves on. When you heard someone talking and bringing that down to a level that they understood, yes, they can show growth within that range. This is how you can get them to that point. But that takes a level of educating and training, and that's something that was useful in the past. But it's right on what you're talking about. we have a responsibility for all those students, not just those that may be performing below basic. So we recognize that.
I see that with addressing learning loss. You've got kids who seriously lost learning. We need to fix that. You have kids that didn't. What are you going to do with them? I would posit when you get 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, you actually have cohorts of kids that maybe are a grade level apart now, but they're in the same classroom. What do you do? I mean, and I don't know that you ever fix that. You just age them out at some point. I don't know how you fix that at 6th, 7th, 8th grade. You're running out of time. So I like Mr. Roosevelt, I want to see a plan to address it. Pick something we know is a problem. I've given you one, and I've asked for data for the 2 schools. The board should get all of it. I've asked for granular data for all of this. And tell me how you're going to fix it. And tell me it's not going to take a decade to fix. That's what I'm looking for.
Mr. Tate?
Yeah, but I've always felt that the number one responsibility of the board is to make sure that we provide the resources needed for our administrators and teachers to do what they need to do. So there's a question there. If we provided a bolus of money to do what you'd love to do to help these kids make up their learning loss in math, where would it go? Would it go? I mean, I'm a big fan of Summer Academy. That's not going to help kids in the middle of the school year who are behind. And you talked about devoting time in the classroom to remedial learning, which of course means you're not teaching what you otherwise had planned to teach. So what kind of resources could we possibly add to help make up for learning?
Are you asking me or are you asking my bosses?
I'm asking everybody.
I mean, from my perspective, if we could add some more math specialists at the elementary level to remediate our struggling learners. Currently, math specialists have, on average, have about 25 to 26 classes each week that they prep for, and they're usually a different prep for every one of those. They have a packed schedule. If we had more bodies that were in the buildings, perhaps 1 per building, to be able to focus on that building and then to help start coaching, teachers that need assistance, that would be fabulous to me.
At the elementary level?
At the elementary level, even at the middle level.
But why not the middle?
Well, I'm saying, and then adding on, math specialists at the middle level we have drop periods at the middle level that we could use to remediate students. We have RA at the middle level that we could use and teachers are working their tails off during RA. It's not, I've been in the classrooms and I don't see that they're in some cases supervising a group of kids sitting in the classroom and they've got kids surrounding their desks that they're trying to help. So I think more manpower woman power to help them be able to provide remediation would be incredible.
How many do you have at the covering elementary, 10 elementary schools now, math specialists?
8.6, I believe. I believe 8.6. I'd have to check my.
And you would like to double that?
I mean, yeah, but I'm not that crazy.
Just asking.
If I could bring it up to 10, that would be fabulous.
Okay.
And then add 1 at each middle school. That would be great. I mean, you're asking, I'm sure Andy's probably gonna.
I realize that's putting people on the hot spot the hot seat by asking that question. But I really think that's our job, principally, is to say, what more could we give you to help you do your job?
And we tried last summer to get money for remediation and learning loss, and the acting superintendent at the time said she didn't want it. So
Well,
this
that's
is good. This is good. If someone's, yeah, I'll take it. So,
I think, if I could just chime in here, I think to your question, Mr. Tate, I think we need to take a micro and a macro look at that answer, right? Like the immediacy of it and then long-term planning
Right.
from, listen, I'm a former math specialist myself, but I also know the needs. We just talked to you about the, the EL population. And so we can go to every department. And so, that's part of it. We also have to take a deeper look, as Nicole and Al just said to you. We're trying to understand this information ourselves. So we're not trying to be disrespectful to you, to the board, and giving, in the community, giving a high 30,000-foot view. We want to know by building, by grade, by student. We do get that information through PBOS, but what we don't know, what I can't sit here tonight and tell you, and I don't think Al or Nicole or Julie can, we can't tell you trends. We can tell you some trends of subgroups if we're talking about a special education population, or if we're talking about an EL population. We can pull, high-level stuff and tell you, but until we can drill down and have the right tools, and I don't even know what they might be at this moment, have the right tools to pull that information out. That's what I'm talking about when I say micro and macro, immediate, long-term. So that's kind of how I would answer your question, Mr. Tate.
It makes perfect sense.
Thank you for the
Thank you,
question.
Dr. Senko.
And Mrs. Fowler, I think you had a question?
Yeah, so while we're talking about that, I just also want to comment that we have to think about that next time we talk about the budget too, because it's easy now to say, oh, what do you need? We'll give you the resources that you need, but somebody has to pay for them. So let's keep that in mind. And my question really is, because I saw the discrepancy between like 7th and 8th grade, does it have to do with the actual subject that we are learning in these grades? Is it that maybe grades 3 through 5 or 6, it's more like an easier math concept, and then all of a sudden they're exposed to something that is very difficult to process, and they need something.
That's a good observation. The standards, they have different domain titles in K to 5, and then 6 to 8, it changes. Ratio and proportions come in 6 to 8. They're not in elementary. Things, probability comes in middle school where it's not. So they are, in many ways, many brand new topics that are introduced then. So yes, it is in many ways new content. It's assumed that students know how to use fractions. It's assumed that they have computation, so they're no longer building on that. They're assuming that and starting new content. So that is part of the issue. And I also think we have to look long-term and see what our outcomes are for students. PSSA is one measure. It is interesting to me that the state averages are so low, and that many of our comparable districts, we perform at that same level. So that is a piece of information. I belong to a cohort of math supervisors and coordinators in the Philadelphia area, Delaware County, Montgomery County, Chester County, and we have tried to talk to the state. We've had Bill Morrow from the state, and they don't really want to talk about why we can have so many kids. It's a phenomenon that happens in all the districts. We can have students pass a Keystone exam, but they don't pass an 8th grade exam, and it's not a lack of effort on a student part. I'm not going to sit here and say, well, kids care, and there's something when in a normal year, 32% of your students in the state of Pennsylvania are passing the exam that you write.
So,
and we have good outcomes in the end. We have students that do excellent on AP. We have students that don't go to AP courses that are prepared. We're not getting feedback from students that they weren't prepared to go to the next level in college. So
yeah, so that was my follow-up, so if they struggle in 7th and 8th grade overall, do they get better in high school?
They do. We do very well on our Keystone scores, and as Alan Nicole talked about, our PBAS data, which shows growth. Normally, our Algebra 1 PBAS data is all in the blue, which means that they are exceeding the recommended growth in a student. So it's hard to, I'm not a statistician, so I can't explain it, but we get them to the Keystone exam and they do pretty well.
So part of the problem seems to be the test in itself. It sounds like.
Possibly. When it's 31, 32% across the state of Pennsylvania.
Yeah. Unacceptable.
That's why we want to use
Multiple, right.
pieces of data.
Thank you. Any other
Mr.
item?
McKay.
Yes, Mr.
I
Salisbury.
got a couple things.
Mike Wafter.
Yes. Just
Um,
checking in.
The board just received an email from a parent. There's some parts of this, I won't read, but I think it's important in light of the conversation that only the board got this. In answer to your question about 7th and 8th grade math and what happened, pre-algebra is a subject of 7th. Algebra 1 is a subject for 8th. The kids have no idea what to do. COVID hit them in 6th grade. They have no basis for algebra or flying blind at this point in high school. Investigate how many students have failed in our middle schools versus previous years. Please help families to find solutions for robust remediation. We need teachers to reteach concepts that these kids never got, or the test scores will continue to reflect the learning loss through their high school career. They are not reteaching. They are currently plowing through their own curriculum. Some type of after-school, twice-a-week program has to be installed. It's the only way these kids will ever catch up. And this kind of leads into my thought process. And I sit in meetings during the day and talk about learning loss, because it's real. If you search the math scores around the country, everybody's in the same boat. I have not read anything about solutions. Nothing. Nothing about solutions. We have more data in this district than we know what to do with. And we have no solutions. We've had 2 new math programs in the last 5 years. The first math program at the elementary level was an 80-minute program. We only gave them 60 minutes. To me, that's destined to fail. We've created space in the elementary school now to pick up the 20 minutes lost. If I'm speaking wrong in minutes, please correct me. I have 2 kids in the school district that are actively below where they should be. Whose fault is it? I don't want to blame anybody, but what is the solution to this? We have ESSER funds for the academy. We had how many kids in the academy? I questioned that earlier this year. This is the subject matter that started earlier this year. April, we had this conversation. Many of you folks were not in the room. The board was. We walked out of that with middle school scores that were dramatically terrible. And different. We're here 6 months later, and my hat's off to the administration that we're going to tackle this. But we need solutions. If you go back to the slide that I have for recent cohorts, that kid started 3rd grade was at 77%. By the time they made it to 8th, 7th grade, they were down to 61%. They dipped to 20. What's that? 51%. 51%.
Is it 60?
Okay, I can't do it on the last. I apologize. Yeah, I can't do the math.
We got you.
Oh, math. What are you doing? But to the naked eye, when you look at that, I mean that's atrocious. If that's a good word.
But I think you all, and I don't disagree with you, and the directional issues are getting to me. It happens across the street.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I got to be honest with you. I don't care what happens across the street.
I agree.
We're comparing Philadelphia that pours boatloads of money into the school district. The whole state is at 53% proficient. Under 53%. The state stinks. We should be comparing Council Rock. We have enough data. So when you go back to the slide that you took off, our kids have dramatically done worse in math. I mean,
As measured on the PSSA.
Right.
I would say that we have other data that says that our kids are doing really well.
Well, I think that's where
As
I'm going
measured on
with
the
this.
PSSA.
That's the next larger conversation. To Mike's point, he wants to see more things. I'm not asking for a ton of work, but I think you're getting a sense and a flavor of what some board members would like to see. I just want to know at the end of the day that our kids are performing. And if we're going to use PSA data, I say opt out. If it doesn't make any sense, and it doesn't judge our kids properly, and they are moving forward, why force the kids to lose a day of education to take PSSAs? I don't know. But we have data. The data shows the kids are not doing well. And I mean, I would even argue, I don't know why we do a K-6 program anymore. Because it looks like 6th, 7th, and 8th, this is our biggest problem. Maybe that should be part of secondary schools. I mean, there's a lot of conversation we can have about this, but I want your solutions. I really do. Because I think, to Mr. Tate and I spoke the other night about it, and you already said it. What can we do as a board? I don't know if money's the answer. You want 10 more specialists?
No, I don't want 10 more, I just want.
Well, I'll give you 10 more, but I need to know people that get it to 10. And that's not something I want to have that conversation about. But if that's the solution, then that's something the board's got to work towards. But, you know, the data's there. If we're going to use data, let's analyze
We
it.
have to
Let's read
decide
it.
what data to use.
Yeah.
Because I personally, as new to East Fern, have a hard time putting credence in something where 32%. And if you compare, I've looked at comparable districts to Council Rock, they kind of have the same general makeup. We perform where they perform. We're not underperforming.
So something's wrong with it.
So
Whether or not we like it, something's wrong with it.
So we need to find other measures that we.
That we can put our hands on.
Sure.
But I think to the parent that wrote that, I think that's a big deal right now. You cannot be teaching in 2022 the same curriculum, the same process, the same speed.
I 100% agree.
That kids aren't operating at. And I think that's the biggest thing I'd like to see examined, where our kids actually are. Because our 5th graders are probably in 4th grade for math. So they're sitting in a 5th grade class. So how do you address that? How do you teach that?
We have CDT data that can
Yeah.
help us with that.
Because parents are getting very frustrated. And I'll add one more thing, if I'm thinking of, because I'll forget it, Julie,
Okay.
please. My kid has had 5 math programs in the last 5 years.
All based on the same standards.
5 different math programs at Council Rock. She was test product for things we didn't approve. She didn't do bridges. Then she got bridges. She test pilot, got bridges, moved to 6th grade, something different. 7th grade, she got whatever they had last year. In 8th grade, now she's doing.
Well, 6th and 7th grade, 6th and 7th grade were the same program. Up until, it was Glencoe course 1
Okay,
and
4
course 2.
and 5 years. One of those years is COVID. It's a lot. And statistically, we say that the ladies have a harder time with math. So throw that into the scenario.
Well, I hope we don't say that.
I don't see that.
I don't say that.
They don't like math, I follow.
I don't say that either.
That's not
Mike-
true.
That is not true.
That's not true.
That is not true.
Mrs. Marcel, you have a question.
I think it's just more a comment based on what I've heard and things I'm thinking of. So based on what I'm hearing from everyone, it seems like maybe we're only seeing the PSSA scores. So if there's another story or narrative or other test scores, like I would say, please think about what those things are and bring them back to us because I think it's helpful. I know my daughter is currently a 7th grader. Last year, her PSSA score for math was absolutely scary. This year, it's better. And interestingly, last year was her best year in math in 6th grade with the old curriculum. Just was doing amazing. And now she's hanging in there in 7th grade with the new curriculum. But I just think...
Which middle school does she go to? So she's not in the new curriculum. She's still in the Glencoe.
Oh,
McGraw Hill.
Whatever it is. Just the point is that I went from being a parent that was very concerned about her math to her like really enjoying math, being an honors math. And so I think there are more inputs. So the point is that if you guys have another story to tell beyond this, I think we should hear it. So that's one thing. 2 is that I think that we need some type of plan. And so if we are thinking about our budget later on, next year, if you guys have suggestions, I remember the meeting that we were sitting in where we said, hey, like, we have extra money, what do you guys need? And so I'll say it again. Please think of what you would like. Maybe we'll get a different answer this time, but like, I just think it would be helpful to be able to think about if at middle school, elementary, whatever it is, maybe it's both, just to give us some options. And it may be that there are some things that we invest in that are more helpful to help deal with this instead of other areas, you know, and obviously we want you guys to be able to tell us what that needs to be. But from my perspective, it sounds like you have some good ideas that you already mentioned, but if we had a plan and we can think about how to invest in that long term, because it sounds like this is a problem that's been potentially there even before COVID, and math is just difficult. And I think, I mean, that was my least favorite subject, honestly. And so I think for a lot of our students, like, you guys, you know that there are some better things other than PSSA scores. Like, that's only one data point. And so if we could learn more about what is that story about our students, and it might be different at Holland Middle versus New England Middle. It doesn't have to be the same thing applied, in my opinion, to every school. If we can help our students where they need to be, and if that's a good investment for the district, I think that that's a great place for us to be considering our budget dollars. And we know that we don't have just this huge amount of money that we're trying to, you know, kind of look at right now. But it might be worth us spending money there in the future. And then lastly, I would just say, it's more of a question for you guys. You know, if you're a parent who just got the PSSA, you know, kind of information in the mail, and you don't want to wait until the end of this year to see what the board does in terms of math, and you're worried about your child, if you could give, you know, and also for the mother that sent that email to us, like, how do you advocate for your child? Are you going to the teacher, like, if you guys can maybe just talk about that, because if someone's listening tonight and they're worried about their student, what should they be doing? Because they may not want to wait to see if they can qualify for Summer Academy. They may not want to see, you know, they don't know what's going to happen, and math is important. So if we don't catch maybe that child getting assistance earlier, what are some things that you guys would recommend that the public should maybe think about as they're thinking about what to do with their child?
At the elementary level, we have conferences that will be coming up real soon. So I think that's one piece of this is communication and sharing what perhaps may not be clear, or asking the teacher to explain how some of these needs are being addressed, not just the PSSA, but any data that comes home. I think that communication is really important, and I always stress to parents that you don't have to wait for conference time either. Yes, it's around the corner, but certainly the clear lines of communication are always encouraged in all of our buildings. So reach out at any time and request a phone call with the teacher and just say, how is my child looking and performing? I've got these results, and I just want to walk through them with you. It doesn't have to wait for conferences, and it doesn't have to wait until the end of the year to see what this plan, you know, ends up being. I think clear communication is what I would recommend. Reach out to the teacher and to the team.
Yeah, I mean, I always recommend the parents to reach out directly to the classroom teacher. That's kind of where the rubber hits the road. The classroom is where the magic happens. And it may be where the remediation and intervention needs to happen as well. But asking those direct questions of the classroom teachers, what do you see as some of the deficient areas of my son or daughter? What areas are they struggling in? How might I be able to assist at home? What type of remediation programs at the school could we participate in, whether that's WIN, whether that's clinic, whether that's capitalizing on RA time? But I think starting that conversation, that seems like a natural start with the classroom teacher.
I think it's always, I mean, I have had a number of parents who have ninth graders who had a lot of issues during the middle school years with math reach out just to say, you know, I don't know what to do. And I think for some folks, you know, it's like they're kind of just throwing their hands up, and maybe, I don't know if they're just going to get a tutor or what they're going to do. But I appreciate you guys sharing your thoughts on how people can maybe get help
and try to figure out what their next step is.
We recognize at the secondary level, you spoke about the difficulty of parents helping their children with math. And you start getting into those higher grade levels, and I know I speak from my own math experience. I think we could all, when you get from some computational skills to what does a variable mean? What's a constant? And y-intercepts and slopes and geometry. Maybe I'm bringing up some bad memories for people, but it's difficult. I mean, it's rigorous, and now parents are unfamiliar with a lot of that. So what I used to be able to really put my arm around you and really assist you with, it's difficult. And I understand
The
that.
standards are different from what, at least I'm probably one of the older ones in the room, but from what we were taught. The standards now ask students to do things that when we were students, we didn't have to do math that way, and the standards are telling us that that's how we have to teach children now. And that is, so it does make it hard for parents to help a child because it's a different way.
I have a question, if you don't mind, I'll come right back to you. And Mr. Salmon, you just reminded me of this. You may not have the answer for this tonight, that's fine. But I know some years ago, we were seeing a trend of parents opting their children out of taking the PSSA. I'm wondering if that trend is continuing. Does it have any bearing on our scores? What do you see happening in that area?
So that's a great question. I don't have exact numbers right now, but we have tracked it over the last several years. And the number that resonates with me and has since, this was during the time when I was the director, just at our 2 middle schools, we had 634 students at both combined middle schools opt out of PSSA. And I remember it from then, so I'm giving that to you off of memory. But we have tracked the opt-outs of PSSAs over the last several years. Our principals do it at the building level. And then we compile that information. We can get that for you by year and by school also, if you want to see that.
Thank you for that. And Dr. Thorwald, and then Mr.
Yeah, just a couple of comments, no questions now. The data we're asking for in terms of granular is the CDT data. And if it's done well, it tracks the student over time, over teacher, over building, over grades. I mean, it's real hard to manipulate because it's a multi-dimensional data set, but it's not that, I mean, it's easy enough to do. That's where the information is, because that should be consistent. And if you see kids doing this, you have all the information wrapped around it to find out why. And when I say kids doing this, you're always going to have a kid that knows that for a variety of reasons. Andy and I talked at length today. We had a year, something happened at home, but in aggregate, when you start looking at those en masse, you can pull information out. There's lots of information in there that you can use. So that's where you want to focus on. Way back when I first started on the board, multiple superintendents ago, we wanted a data analyst. We didn't get it. You have to have a specialty to do this. I speak from, you have to have a specialty for this. And then the second thing is, what do you need? I like that, but I'd like to add a little bit more to it. If I give it to you, what am I going to get back? Because if I just give it to you and there's no change, then it failed. So someone has to own and be accountable when it doesn't work. So I would just, I'm getting that way with these new math programs. If I give you a program and your scores didn't change, it was a failure. I mean, I agree that we need to give them this, but there's got to be, what do we get for that? I mean, that's important. It can't just be to throw money at it. That doesn't work. So.
Thank you. And Mr. Hidalgo?
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. I'll try not to be too long, but I've been thinking about this personally a lot. And so I spoke to the teacher, my own concerns after getting that. And it's a wonderful, great group, and we're going to tackle this. I'm one of the parents that want to be empowered, so I'm asking for help in empowering and providing those resources for the parents to empower themselves to help the children. Because if you look at a teacher, even to try how hard it is for me, one person, to put my heart and soul into that one student, these teachers have 26 to 30 students. I'm talking just on the elementary level too. So, it's hard, when you talk about the amount of time we have in a day. with everything else going on. They have literally 3 or 4 minutes per kid, you know, if you think about it, for this, if they're lucky. So I can go back, I can look at the PSA, I can take old assessments and do it, and then I can hit it, you know, and then I know where the weak spot is, meaning if they get it wrong, I know where the area is. So what I was thinking there's other assessments out there, a lot simpler, something that, you know, because we can only do so much in a day. It's not like I can do this every day, but when I'm up to it, hey, let's get down, let's sit down, do a couple problems on this assessment. Oh, I can see you got that, move on. If there's one that he doesn't have, then I know that that's a spot that we can teach, and it's all just arithmetic. So you literally just have to teach the basics to them. Sometimes we teach them. And that's it. You could have learned it last year. You were going to forget it, you know, over the summer with everything else going on, just like we all do. So I'd like to see what other free resources or some kind of like standard that people can go on, log in. They can just test their kid themselves at their own pace.
Khan
See what they
Academy is
have.
always one of my favorite.
Khan
go-tos.
Academy.
Khan
Okay.
Academy.
Yeah, I heard
Prodigy.
about that.
Some students use Prodigy.
Well, I'd like
That's
one
good
that's
for
aligned to our curriculum, you know, it's just specific to what we're doing.
Okay.
So if they're teaching all these concepts, but the underlying concepts need to be there, well, then make sure that that's on that list of things to test for that grade. Then they know, because you can go in and you're already on to the next level, but you don't know they won't know. The problem could be the underlying, you know,
We also
concept.
have first in math in third and fourth grade,
Which I'm a big advocate of, you know.
which is great. A lot of schools buy it in other grade levels, but it is purchased at the district level for third and fourth grade for computational fluency.
And that's what I like. That's what I like. And that one that tracks it, it shows you the Common Core. You mentioned Common Core. I thought we weren't, when I last talked about the pluses of IXL, and I said it was aligned to Common Core, I thought that wasn't particularly important, but you mentioned it tonight that we are.
Well, IXL, I mean, I probably haven't looked at it in 3 years. It's aligned to a basic level of the core standards, but it looks more at computation, and the standards go well beyond computation. So if you're looking for computation practice, IXL can work, but that's not really what the standards are. The standards are going beyond the application of.
Standards are more language heavy.
Correct. Math is a
That I don't
language
agree.
heavy.
And I don't agree with the standard. That's not your
I
problem.
can only have.
But I think they miss out the computation. If they don't have the computation, then what does it matter? if you
And
can-
we are, yes, I 100% agree. I 100% agree, and we are working on computation. In fact, we're retraining teachers on the in-service day. They haven't done a training in first and math in a while. So just reacquainting them with new teachers to the grade level. This is the resources, this is how you should be using it.
Yeah, so as I said, there's something, instead of just saying Khan Academy, let's get something for the kids that they can go, that the parents can use in a particular than to just go looking. IXL is a good one. That may be all the tool you need. Thank you.
Mr. Tate?
Just a 30-second comment to Mrs. Crawford's point about the value-added analysis of assessment. I was at Educational Testing Service back in '99 and 2000, when scholars really started looking at value-added. And to me, that's really the true value of assessments. I mean, yeah, benchmarking ourselves against the state isn't very valuable because we don't want to be comparing ourselves statewide. But that value-added and tracking progress is really an important, sophisticated way of looking at data.
Thank you. Other questions, comments for tonight?
Ready to get public comment?
I don't think we're
When we
done.
get there.
I'm tired. I'm getting tired.
So we talked a lot about, generally speaking about the elementary level, but just a couple of things I wanted to point out. Obviously, this is showing ELA math and science. After the 2020 school year, there is a significant drop in the ELA and math, which we've talked about. But what's nice to see is the math at the elementary level does, go in the right direction after that 2022, last year, as well as our science is continuing to stay strong. The ELA is something that we are going to look into, the fact that following 2020, it remained pretty much this, in the same place. So we are looking at that piece, but again, all the other talking points that we had related to this, we did already bring up in discussion, but I'm happy to answer any questions after Mr. Trump shares about
So,
7 and 8.
So we talked a lot about the 7th and 8th grade scores and 6th, 7th, and 8th grade for that matter. So here's just a look at the 7th and 8th grade PSSA results. And it shows you the trend data, and then obviously you have your interrupted learning, and then, okay, so we're looking then for a rebound after that, and then we are seeing a rebound in the areas in ELA, for example. So the 2022 scores, you're kind of back to where you were pre-pandemic, which is a good thing. We obviously, we talked a lot about the math scores being depressed across the state, across the county, and obviously we see that, and that's going to be an area that we're going to really target and try to work through. Whether the state scores and percentages have value or not, our 2022 is 20 percentage points higher than the state average. So, I think that is saying something. And then we're seeing in the area of science, again, similar levels, a little bit lower than what we saw pre-pandemic. So, that's kind of what we've been focused on tonight. So there it is in the raw data. Again, you talk about data analysis. I think, Dr. Thorpe, I really appreciate what you said about like a person that can really dive into that data. And to Mr. Tate's question about, well, if it was tabula rasa, what is it, blank slate, what is it that you could write? Someone who could really give us some good information from the data that we have so that we would have more targeted intervention and remediation. I think that's important. Everybody wants a return on investment. I think you get a return on investment when you have quality data with quality data analysis. Quality data in and of itself is not into that. But, and just as a side note, I would say that I have enjoyed the conversation tonight because I do think this is what we're here for. And again, back to your question, and you talk about what is it that we want, and it reminds me like there's 4 essential questions that we ask, whether or not we're struggling with math scores at the middle school, whether we're talking about COVID pandemic, the questions remain the same. What is it that we want students to learn, and that's our curriculum. How will we know that they learned it, and that's our assessment piece. What will we do if they didn't learn it, and that's our remediation and intervention piece. What will we do if they already learned it, gifted enhancement piece. So we ask those questions anyway. I guess those questions maybe become a little bit more pronounced when you look at certain data sets and say, why is it that way? Or certain conditions that you have. But the questions don't necessarily change. We want to improve math scores. We could do 4 hours of math instruction every day. Time on task is certainly a big indicator. Something's going to have to give, though, and I don't know if everybody is going to be, thrilled with that idea. So,
Kids at flea school.
I also want to caution that as much as we want to develop a plan and we want to be smart about the plan, that's why we talk about maybe having some data analysts drive us in certain directions. We want a return on investment. There's no magic formula out there for all of a sudden, like math scores are just, whoa, wow, that's unbelievable. Because I really think there's some unbelievable work that's going on currently. Does that mean that we don't address our deficit areas? Absolutely not. We're going to address them. But, and I'm not saying it is what it is, but to some degree, we're going to do whatever we can to improve. Yeah. But there's not going to be a magical formula. So.
And build on our strengths.
And build on our strengths. So real quick about, because I know it's getting late, the Keystone data is even more confusing, sorry. Because the Keystone data, you really deal with cohorts. And the cohort data tends to be better, but so here's a couple interesting things about this as we look at it. The Keystone is aligned to 3 Keystone courses. So we have Algebra 1, we have Biology, and we have English 10. Now let's take Algebra 1. Students can take Algebra 1 at very different grade levels throughout the district. You have 8th graders taking Algebra 1, you have 9th graders, you may have 10th graders, you may even have some 7th graders. Algebra 1, many different grade levels. Biology is similar, 2 grade levels primarily with biology. You have an honors biology in 9th grade, and you have more of an academic biology track in 10th grade. English literature is the only one that's grade level pure, that's English 10. So you have kids taking these Keystone assessments at all different places. That's why it's very important to say, let's have a cohort at grade 11, okay? So now when we say cohort at grade 11, and I'll just use this 2022 as an example, that's the 11th grade cohort. That means they are our current seniors, the class of 2023, okay? Just so we understand. So the number that clearly jumps out at you on this graph is our biology score, right? So, and again, I'm not saying this to be defensive, but I'm just trying to put it within the context. When you look at that cohort, our current seniors, cohort of 2022, you go back 3 years from the seniors, they were 9th graders in 2020 when they did not participate in the assessment. Therefore, they are not part of the formula. We happen to have, there's 5 honors biology sections at Council Rock North, there's 5 honors biology sections at South. Historically, on trend data, honors biology students typically score 90 to 95% are advanced or proficient in the biology. So those scores aren't included. If we added them back and I projected what their scores would be, now you're talking about alignment more in that low 80s to mid 80% advanced and proficient. So again, what is the data mean? Like if folks didn't know that about cohorts, that would be tough to understand. So that's one anomaly, that I just wanted to point out.
But you can explain it.
Well, I can explain it. I don't know if I can explain it in a 30-second elevator speech, but I might need 2 minutes.
Close. No, that's pretty good.
Yeah. So that's just to give you a sense. And the scores, well, I won't go into that. But yeah, the scores have been, relatively stable at the high school level regarding the Keystone aligned courses. Okay. So now we're up to questions.
Yes, Mr. Hickey has one.
Yeah, first of all, I like you said, I appreciate that little asterisk on the bottom, what explains it, which we said, the other information we had didn't have any explanation to it. I did have a question, I don't know if you go back to the ELA scores for the elementary, any possible reason for the precipitous drop due to the influx of immigrants as it relates to?
It's a great question. Like I said, we're not sure exactly why that initial drop, other than perhaps the interrupted learning piece. But our other question was, we didn't see a change, again, big picture with this general data between 2021 and 2022. But again, other data is showing some really good strength. So we just have to drill down a little bit further on that piece.
Thanks.
Oh, I'm just staring at sorry.
If I could just jump on that, Nicole's right, we don't know. And I hate to speculate, but we do know that, and I think I mentioned this at the last education committee meeting, when we have students that come into our schools that are ELA students, year 1, they are not required to take the PSSAs. Year 2, they are required, but the research indicates that it takes kids 3 to 5 to 7 years to master the language. So we've had that same thought, we just can't confirm or deny it at this point.
Yeah, and because the reason I ask is if you flip to the 7th and 8th grade, the scores are more in line. You don't see that drop. It's like you said, maybe they're, 2% from 2018 to 2022.
You'll see that in the CDT data when you start to see part too.
Yeah, and the CDT data, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but as we administer CDTs, if we look at a 5th grade classroom, and Julie will be able to help me here, if we look at a 5th grade classroom and administer a CDT, it's supposed to take about one class period. Last time I heard Julie speak on this, it's about 90 minutes. So each, right, am I right on that? So each time we administer a CDT, if we do it 4 times in 5th grade, we're losing 2 hours, 2 class periods of instruction between teacher and student.
I'm going to say it's actually a little bit longer.
So then you're losing 3 times, you're losing 12 hours of instruction, math instruction. The other thing I would say about CDTs, and I don't want to pick them apart, but I think it's fair to say, we know we had interrupted learning. We know that the state didn't do anything to change their approach in terms of any kind of adjustments or anything. So we're measuring kids on these CDTs based on being in school every day, all day, and not missing math instruction. So, you know, everything we talk about, there are certainly variables.
If I may, I'm not a believer you have to give them 4 times a year. I wouldn't give them at all if you're not going to do it. It's what are you doing? If you're going to take, and I think these are good metrics, but do something with it. If you're taking the data for the sake of taking the data and not aggregating it all together for the district, then I don't know that you need to do 4 in a year. It may be 2.
Well, that's a fair comment, and this board was gracious enough to allow us the position of supervisor of curriculum and instruction. And one of the very early and continuous conversations with Althea was to find, with the work of the coordinators and the administrators, find the 3 most important pieces of data that we're going to be able to benchmark, that we're going to be able to study, and that we're going to be able to use to inform our decision-making in terms of how we're driving instruction in the classroom so we can measure kids' progress, rather than collecting all these data points and then just, we are easily drowned in data. So we have to identify what those smaller number of data are that we want to use to measure. And again, like we started this conversation with the PSSA data, that is one litmus test. That's one measurement, and we have a lot of them out there. So,
but you could spend half your school year measuring, and that's not teaching. So I'd rather, you know, I work in the digital data collection space, and to your point, Andy, you can collect monstrous amounts of data, but if you don't do anything with it,
right,
you just collected monstrous amount of data. You know, I am mindful, when I say CDT, it is a good measuring stick.
Mm-hmm.
But it shouldn't get in the way of teaching kids math or English language arts.
Time is precious. Teachers will be the first to say they don't want to over-assess either, and it's binding, and this is why this discussion is helpful. We're having these talks right now. We want to find the right measures, and how are we going to use that information to inform our instruction and support kids? So we're having the same discussions.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also important that we don't pick a data set that makes everything look like roses, lollipops, and rainbows, right? But at the same point, I think it's also brave to put something in there that demonstrates the flip side of this. Like, for example, what we're looking at here with PSSA, if a lot of people aren't measuring up, whether it's in the state or whether it's, we need to ask why, right? Is it, as it was brought up earlier, is this just a bad test, right? And I know that if we spend all of our time focusing on how to pass that one data, we might not actually be meeting standards, and we might not actually be educating kids. So that's clear. But yeah, to your point, we don't want to be in analysis paralysis, but we need to make something, take a stab at it, and then evaluate that. And then if that works, great, keep going, make it better. If it doesn't, then let's re-scramble. To the point of the math programs, maybe that's what's been going on with changing different math programs or curriculums to do all of that. At some point, though, we have to ask the question. I mean, I know from personal, I didn't like math also when I was younger, but then I grew to actually liked it, one of my favorite subjects. I've seen kids, my kids included, and other kids, not like a subject matter, and all of a sudden it's amazing. Why? What's the difference? Well, it could be all sorts of things. It could be the curriculum. It could be the teacher. It could be how many friends you've got in the class. I mean, there's a lot of different factors that go into nosedives and hill climbs. So I get that, but at some point we have to figure out, is it curriculum? Is it teacher? Is it some other motivating factor? So I think it still is important to look at the broad set of data, but pick a couple that we're going to say, this is what we're going to focus on, and see if that improves things. And if it doesn't, then let's change it up.
But I think a lot of it, to your point, whether, it doesn't matter necessarily the program, what we title it, what color the book is, if it's available online. There's no substitute for good teaching and good learning.
Yeah.
And that goes back to one of the slides that Julie spoke about. Fundamentally speaking, kids need to know how to add, subtract, multiply, divide, multiply decimals, as Mr. Hidalgo said. So it doesn't matter whether we call it illustrative or whether we call it bridges or envision. We need teachers and kids together so that we can identify where the students' needs are, and our teachers can drive that instruction home to them to help, close the gaps where the gaps are, and help extend the kids who are easily, maybe not always easily, working hard to meet with success.
I know my math time is up, but can I go back and address because I've heard it a couple times about the changes in math programs over the years. Envision was 10 years in place, and they stopped supporting the program, which is why we had to look for another program. Middle school, we saw the need. That program, the McGraw-Hill course 1, 2, and 3, had been in probably 8 years. So we really haven't changed programs. It just so happened that it was my turn in the curricular cycle to purchase programs. So it wasn't Julie Eastburn thinking like, I want to keep picking programs. I was told there's money, this is your year, you have to buy a math program. And so it's not like we're continually cycling through programs.
And
Just
Mr.
a
Hidalgo?
question, because I think Pennsbury just started using Envision, so did they just get rid of the old Envision program?
Yeah.
And then was the new program an option, or was there a gap?
Teachers looked at the new program. That was one, I don't know if it's the same edition that Pennsbury picked up. That I don't know, but teachers looked at it and they found that it wasn't going to address the weaknesses that we saw in the old Envision program. So that was 100% one of the programs.
So there were weaknesses too, it wasn't just that they stopped supporting it.
Right, for the version we had, like the 2012, and if you were going to go to the new platform, if you were going to continue to use online resources and all of that, you had to go to the new platform, which means you had to purchase the new books, which means, textbook publishers know what they're doing.
For the record, I wasn't a fan of Envision, so it's hard to please me, thank you.
Anything else for folks at the table? No. Final question?
Me, Bob, not me. I'm just hearing in the community, I'm hearing a lot of concerns. I know we're talking PSSAs, that's 4th grade, 5th grade, absolutely. And they showed an 11th grade slide here. But a lot of high school parents who just felt like their kids have been left out to dry with all of this, obviously relating to the scores that have happened. 4 of my friends that are high school kids in the last 24 hours have talked to me about how they're having to budget extra for math tutors. And I know this is not a surprise, but just what I'm just conveying what I'm hearing in the community, that there's a lot of attention paid to the 4th and 8th graders, obviously, those scoring cohorts, and that, some of them are listening in tonight and texting me going, can you please ask them to pay attention, the high schoolers too. So I wanted to be able to say that in advance. And then someone had sent something and said that listening in tonight, they had asked me if that said I could read, saying I'm a little insulted that the board member tonight felt the need to say that they interpreted results of state testing during the tenure to find the gaps. The pandemic is not an example of normal to poor test scores. These results that we're seeing tonight show scorched earth levels in math. These aren't gaps, they're giant chasms that are missing for these students. The solutions of old days aren't going to work now. Thank you to those on the board tonight who are asking for solutions.
And I appreciate your comment. If you would just please give us your name.
Ms. Tila Flurry,
Great, thank you.
for the record.
And
Oh, Township, Newtown Township.
And anything else for the good of the group?
I just want to, on behalf of the administrative team and our teachers and our community, I appreciate the open dialogue tonight. This was helpful to us. It's good to know at this table, to have this conversation, good to know what the community's thinking, and stuff that we're hearing from the community are things that we know and we're working on. As Al said, we do not have an immediate solution, but we're aware of it and we will keep moving forward to help our students.
We appreciate that, Dr. Senko. Thank you, everyone. We're adjourned.
All right.